As we move forward, let's take a closer look at something that was much more than just a quirky regulation. It was an outright crime that could land you in hot water: insulting the king. Sounds serious, doesn't it? Well, it was. And in 18th century France, the punishment for insulting the monarch could be as swift as it was severe. This wasn't just about calling the king names or poking fun at his royal mannerisms. It was about questioning the very foundation of the monarchy itself. To insult the king was to threaten the very fabric of French society, and the law was there to ensure that such threats were swiftly and effectively squashed. Historians still argue whether the law was truly meant to protect the dignity of the monarch, or if it was just a convenient tool for silencing dissent and suppressing any form of rebellion. Regardless of the reasoning, one thing is clear: the French monarchy took these insults seriously. The laws surrounding lèse-majesté, the offense of insulting or defaming the king, were often enforced with an iron fist. It was seen as a direct assault on the sovereignty of the king, which, in the minds of the ruling class, was sacred. Now, imagine yourself living in France during the reign of Louis XVI. You're sitting at a tavern, casually chatting with your friends about the latest gossip in Paris. The conversation shifts, and before you know it, you've made a joke about the king's extravagant spending habits or his lack of common sense. The room falls silent. A cold chill settles over the group. Did you just say something that could get you thrown into the Bastille? You weren't even thinking, just a casual quip. But in 18th century France, such comments could be construed as a direct attack on the monarchy. And that's not something to take lightly. In practice, the law was often abused, with people using it to settle personal scores or eliminate political rivals. If you wanted to get rid of someone, it was often easier to accuse them of lèse-majesté than to actually prove any serious crime. This law created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, where anyone could be accused of insulting the king for something as simple as a joke. In fact, many of the accusations were frivolous, based on hearsay, rumors, or misunderstandings, but they still carried the weight of serious punishment. The penalties for lèse-majesté were severe. In some cases, it was as drastic as execution. Yes, you could lose your life for a careless remark. But even if you weren't executed, you could be imprisoned for years, your property seized, and your reputation destroyed. Public execution, particularly through beheading, was often the punishment for those found guilty of insulting the king. This wasn't just a matter of the law taking its course. It was about sending a clear message to the public that such behavior would not be tolerated. But it's not just about the death penalty. The punishment for lèse-majesté could also involve branding, literally marking the body as a criminal. Those convicted might be branded with a mark on their face or their hand, forever signifying them as someone who had dared to insult the monarchy. Imagine that. For the rest of your life, everyone who saw you would know that you'd crossed the line in a way that could never be erased. That what's even more absurd is that the law often applied to things that would seem completely innocent today. For instance, one famous case involved a man who was accused of insulting the king after making a joke about Louis XVI's personal hygiene. To us, it might sound like the kind of offhand remark that gets chuckles around a dinner table, but in 18th century France, it was grounds for imprisonment or worse. And if you were caught repeating such a remark in public, that could be considered an act of rebellion. So, every time you cracked a joke or made a passing comment about the king, you were risking your life. This law had a chilling effect on political discourse. While we may think of the French Revolution as the moment when the monarchy was overthrown, it wasn't just about the great storming of Bastille or the rise of revolutionary figures like Robespierre. It was also the product of years of simmering frustration with a system that allowed the king to remain untouchable, while ordinary citizens had to watch their words and actions at all times. The very law that was meant to protect the monarchy ended up becoming a symbol of its fragility. By the time the revolution rolled around, the resentment that had been building for years was reaching a boiling point. People were tired of living in constant fear of making a simple mistake or a sarcastic remark that could lead to arrest. The king's position, once thought of as divine and inviolable, began to look more and more vulnerable in the eyes of the people. And ultimately, This disconnect between the monarch and the people contributed to the downfall of the French monarchy. But even during the reign of Louis XVI, the law was absurdly convoluted. Imagine being in a situation where your entire fate hinged on something as arbitrary as the tone of your voice or the way a joke was interpreted. It's easy to see why, over time, people would grow increasingly resentful of such a draconian law. What's the point of having a king who can't be laughed at, criticized, or even questioned? The French monarchy's obsession with protecting the king's image may have been one of its ultimate downfalls. In the end, the law of lèse-majesté reminds us just how deeply ingrained control and fear were in French society during the 18th century. While we may think of the period as one of opulent luxury, it was also a time of tension and repression. The monarchy's attempt to protect itself through such extreme laws only served to alienate the very people it was meant to rule. The law wasn't just about controlling speech. It was about maintaining an illusion of divine authority. But as we know, illusions are easily shattered, and the French Revolution would soon sweep those old laws and the monarchy itself away.